Hello everybody and welcome to the weekly horoscope for the 2nd to the 8th of March. So today we're going to talk about the transits that are taking place this week, and I'm going to do this slightly differently. So normally for every single rising sign I break down the transits individually, but what I'm going to do is talk about all the transits at the start because there are a lot, and then I'll talk about how that impacts your zodiac sign through themes. And that's just because it's going to be very long, and if you're watching for like rising sun and moon, it can get very boring. So I'm going to discuss some of the main themes, and then we'll move on to that. So one of the themes I want to talk about is the fact that we had Mars in Aquarius squaring Uranus and Taurus on Friday and continuing until just before the eclipse, because Mars will enter Pisces. And what's interesting is we've got this escalation with Iran and the US and Israel. I talked at length about this last year with Saturn going into Aries and an escalation with Iran. I just predicted, I was like, it's like a pissing contest between leaders. It's very aggressive. And of course, it's the ability to feel constrained and then act out because of it. Mars is all about war. Again, it rules Aries, and Uranus is a planet of shock and volatility. And it's a lot of external stuff that we can't really manage. So I did talk a couple of weeks back about the Israel-Iran situation. I said, when Saturn goes into Aries, I just have my shackles up about this situation. And then seeing Mars squaring Uranus, I thought, I don't really like that. So I think it's quite interesting that that is obviously escalating. Terrible, of course. But the US and Iran are the Republic of the Islamic Republic of Iran. So this is more the 1970s that this was founded and established. So we're looking at that particular birth chart is Sagittarius rising, both of them. So Saturn and Aries in their 5th house. And of course, what happens when Saturn's in the 5th house? It constrains expression, the ability to be the authentic, creative self, the ability to go forward and have fun and do what it wants. And so it's almost like having someone piss on your Cheerios. So not really fantastic all in all. Also a lot of Taurus energy to Israel as well. So there is some volatility with that. When Mars goes into Pisces, which is March the 2nd, that is very non-confrontational. It's very intuitive. But of course, again, Mars is all about courage and activity. It is war. And when it goes into a very, I don't want to say passive sign, but a sign that is much more dreamy and slow, we might find that it kind of goes in fits and starts, like the fish. It goes in and out with that particular conflict. But yeah, Saturn going into Aries, I've always had my shackles up about. We got it for like 2.5 years, so we've got to get used to this. But Saturn in Aries has always coincided with particular issues with Israel throughout history. So it's not a great thing. So that's one thing that is to note. The second, of course, as I've just bounced off of that, is that March the 2nd, we have Mars entering Pisces. So this is not necessarily a bad transit. I talked about that in my March forecast. It's neutral. However, it is action based on intuition. So it is non-confrontational. It's looking at two things and saying, I can do this and I can do that. But what is my intuition telling me? It's also having a bit of an inner war with the subconscious mind and with ourselves, especially if you are in Aries rising, but also remembering to be gentle and compassionate with ourselves. So Mars in Pisces, again, a bit like Mars in Virgo, very neutral. I wouldn't say it's the worst thing in the world. It's certainly not going to be, oh my God, everyone's fighting. But we do have to remember there is a high concentration of Pisces energy at the moment with the Mercury retrograde in Pisces, and of course, Sun and Venus in Pisces too, and North Node. So there is so much going on with that particular transit as well. So Mars in Pisces is adding shades to the way that we're feeling. The day afterwards, March 3rd, we have this blood moon, this lunar eclipse in Virgo, which I've already done a video about. So if you want specific details about your sign, you can watch that video. And so this is a particular eclipse that is focused on success and almost putting your hand out and saying, wow, I've got the success. Bit too good to be true. We can't go forward, we can't go backwards here. Jupiter is supporting a lot of the Pisces energy, but we're not necessarily feeling like we can go full forward with our goals. It's almost like something is left unsaid, which is why I called my Virgo eclipse video All Quiet on the Western Front, right? Because it almost feels like, where can we go with this? And I know I'm not the only astrologer that feels this way. Some others are saying it's really dramatic, and I'm like, no, there are eclipses that are dramatic. Like I said, the Aquarius one was quite deceptive. And this eclipse, I don't really have my shackles up about it at all. Like, 5 out of 5 for an eclipse, really, but it is getting rid of physical and mental clutter and embracing habits that are going to serve you well. Almost looking back the past 2 years that we've had with these Virgo Pisces eclipses and the North Node being in Pisces, specifically South Node in Virgo. What have we learned? What lessons have come up, especially karmically? So this is an eclipse to celebrate, quote unquote, you know, to basically reflect rather than to be too scared or to cut anything off drastically. Then March the 4th, we have Venus in Pisces sextiling Uranus and Taurus. So this particular aspect is sort of like a rule breaker. Again, anytime Uranus is in the mix, we're going to have volatility and want to break rules. And it's also with Venus in Pisces, you know, being that subconscious manifestation energy, and it is an exalted placement. It's saying don't be afraid to go after your goals and follow your heart and to actually be a bit of a rule breaker. If you want to change your life, you're going to have to do things differently. If you want to catch more fish, you've got to use more hooks and also do things a little bit differently. Again, Mars in Pisces is telling you that intuitively, you can start thinking about things in ways that you wouldn't normally. Again, Pisces rules the subconscious mind. So 95% of us is pretty much subconscious mind. So tap into that, meditate, focus on strengthening your confidence in yourself and your trust in yourself, especially because this is an aspect where you get out of your comfort zone. So I actually quite like this particular transit. Then March the 5th, we have the Sun in Pisces, trining Jupiter in Cancer, which is a really good day to strengthen your relationships. Again, it's quite harmonious and compassionate, very kind, so it's not like a nasty energy. It's not necessarily like super energetic, but it's more like a romantic love and light type of energy, which is good for strengthening your relationships and starting projects, and particularly with Sun in Pisces, being confident about where you're going, you know, your spiritual direction of travel right now. March the 6th is a little bit different because we have energy that's completely opposite to Pisces, which is Venus enters Aries in the first house. So it leaves Pisces where it's exalted and moves into Aries where it's in detriment. So again, this is not the worst thing in the world. It's very spring fling, hot and sticky. I've been saying sticky and I don't know why I keep saying sticky. It's like, ugh. Very bold, very confident. It's quite good for being assertive. But it is very reckless. It is, I just want to drop my pants and have my pleasure. And at the same time, it's also a bit selfish. So it's great for self-love, but it's not very good for being cooperative with other people. Again, if it's in something like the 6th house, it can be quite cooperative, but generally on its own, as a transit, it's selfish. March the 7th, the Sun in Pisces is conjunct Mercury in Pisces, retrograding. So remember, that is causing issues with communication and is very non-confrontational. So this particular aspect is like, it's so funny because I had a conversation with one of my friends about this because she's very sort of what if about life, and this is so like, well, if I do this, then this would happen. Then if I do this, and it's like you're talking so much about the logistics of it, but then never actually doing it. It's very, I'm a dreamer, not a doer. And of course, Mercury in Pisces is debilitated, and obviously when it's retrograding, we are not feeling the full extent of our productivity being strategic in the traditional sense. We're focusing on, you know, our dreams and sort of dwelling on some of the things that might be blocking it. Again, the Sun is about ambition and goals, so conjunct Mercury, it's not a bad aspect, but it's definitely a, what do I want to do to live my life? Mercury is productive. And I think you might end up being a little bit more in your head than you would be actually focusing on tangible things. Just be mindful of that. On the same day, Venus in Aries is conjunct Neptune in Aries. So again, very much in the head. So this is very good for manifestation, looking at the fantasies of life, a bit more of a vision. But of course, you know, Aries just wants to be active and impulsive, and Neptune's saying, well, you know, you got to slow down a little bit. And again, it's kind of like grabbing a kid by the back of the shirt and being like, right, okay. And that's even more compounded by March the 8th when Venus in Aries is conjunct Saturn in Aries, because that's very much grabbing the t-shirt and saying, I don't want you running away. So it's not really a great day to commit to anything sort of financial wise. It's a little bit shaky. There's really not a lot of solid foundations here because again, Venus in Aries is far too impulsive and fast. And although Saturn is trying to commit, these two don't really work together. There are elements that can be positive depending on your chart, so it can get you to really lock in with something romantic and something harmonious in your life, or something you want luxury from. However, think about Saturn as a planet which constricts. It's like shrivels things. Imagine Venus being so luxurious and beautiful. Imagine you had a beautiful young woman and next to it was like the crypt keeper that was trying to steal the youth. That's kind of what Saturn's doing when it's conjunct Venus. If it's in a better position, okay, with a better sign, we have a different story here. But in Aries, not so much. So just be mindful that you can dream a little bit on March the 7th, but I wouldn't necessarily start implementing those actions on the 8th because it's a bit too shaky. And then finally, March the 8th, to end the week, we have Mercury in Pisces trining Jupiter in Cancer. This is a bit similar to the aspect I mentioned on the 5th, which was that Sun in Pisces trining Jupiter in Cancer. So this is a strong possibility of meeting people, being very social, putting yourself out there, being a bit more open-minded, as it were. And again, you know, we've got Mercury in Pisces retrograde, so it's not particularly the time to be presenting big ideas on the world stage. But I've said there's nothing wrong with doing small little projects. And I'm a big advocate for not, you know, shying away from things. Like I said, did my PhD viva during a Mercury retrograde. You just have to adapt to what Pisces is trying to bring, which is more emotion and more intuition. I also think this aspect is really good for making friends and maybe even meeting somebody that you like, but you definitely couldn't do that if you were sat at home. So if you do get the chance to go out, even if it's after work, it's a nice aspect to use. Okay, so that's the rundown for the week. The reason why I wanted to do all that is because, as you can tell, there's quite a lot of transits. And if I was doing that for every single sign, we're going to be here for a day. And that's not really good for me. And also it's going to be boring for you. So I'm really doing this with you in mind here. Next week is going to be back to normal. So this is just a kind of a small disruption. So I'm going to go through the zodiac signs and explain thematically how this impacts you for the week. I also just want to add that I am going to be cherry picking the transits based on what I think is going to be most important for you to hear right now. Some of these aspects are kind of repeating themselves, and so I don't want to, you know, say things that seem a bit irrelevant. If you're an Aries, then March the 2nd, your ruler Mars enters Pisces in the 12th house. So Mars in Pisces is neutral, so even though you're Mars ruled, it's not going to negatively affect you like something like Mars in Cancer would. However, in the 12th house, Mars is dampened. It's almost a bit lethargic and lazy. Pisces itself is already very non-confrontational. So this is a time where you're very much in your subconscious. You feel like you're battling yourself, your inner mind, but also really good to be compassionate to yourself, be a bit more spiritual. I would say if there's elements where you're trying to learn from your past mistakes with things that have been in your life that are karmic, this is the time to really get active with working on that. So shadow work, Mars gives you the courage to face it. March the 3rd, we have a lunar eclipse in Virgo, so a blood moon in your 6th house. And I do have a full eclipse video on my channel if you want to know the specifics of this for you. However, it is about getting rid of physical and mental clutter and allowing you to embrace habits that are going to serve you in the right way. I think this is also one of those eclipses where you can actually be proud of the success you've put in with your own discipline, especially physically if you've been at the gym, but also how you've been able to have responsibility for your own life. So this is not an eclipse where you have to be, sad or, cutting things off by any means. March the 6th, Venus enters Aries in your 1st house of self. So that really is going to be wonderful for you because it makes you very magnetic and attractive. You have the ability to manifest more. And also it's one of those energies that's very confident and bold. So it allows you to really go into situations feeling like everything is going to work out for you, which of course it will. March the 7th, we've got Venus in Aries conjunct Neptune Aries in your 1st house. So that's very stimulating for you. It's really good for fantasies and manifestation. However, again, March 8th, Venus in Aries is conjunct Saturn. So then it's not a good day to go after certain goals. And also you might not appear responsible. You might seem a bit flaky to others during this transit. If you are a Taurus, then March the 2nd, Mars enters Pisces in your 11th house, which is going to be really good for getting you to be confident about your long-term goals and strategy. However, it's not very confrontational when it comes to group settings and friendships. Because of Mercury retrograding, be mindful that you may not want to have those battles with people. And, Mars in Pisces is really led by intuition. So with that house of wishes and goal fulfillment, I think it's really good for focusing on what you see yourself like in the future. March the 3rd, we have that Virgo lunar eclipse in the 5th house. So this is becoming more of an authentic version of yourself. This is not a bad eclipse by any means. I have a video on it if you'd like to watch. It's not like I'm cutting off a situationship or I have to do this and that and it's really painful. It's actually more of a, okay, see how far I've come with my own creativity, my own authenticity, my creative and sexual expression, but also how far you've come with your romantic relationships and how you feel about your romantic relationships. Because remember, Virgo is ruled by Mercury, so it really gets into the detail of everything that we've done. March the 4th, Venus in Pisces is actually sextiling Uranus and Taurus. So this is very much like a rule breaker energy. Of course, Uranus being in your first house of self is trying to get you out your comfort zone. And we're really coming up to the last legs of Uranus being in Taurus as well, moving into Gemini April 25th. So because of that, it's sort of getting into the late degrees where it becomes very potent with the volatility and trying to push you out that comfort zone. Venus in Pisces is adding a mix of, friendships and social aspects, especially if you're a Taurus who has a bit of social anxiety, but also getting you to take a bit more of a leadership role in group settings and working with different people and networking. And sort of speaking of, March 5th, Sun in Pisces, trining Jupiter in Cancer is really great for working on projects and starting something new, and specifically starting it with somebody else, groups of people. This is not an independent type of transit. It's strengthening your relationship and feeling confident that you can approach certain group settings and not feel like you're an alien or an outsider. So it's actually quite a nice transit. March the 6th, Venus enters Aries in the 12th house. Very bold and very confident. Of course, Venus in Aries in detriment in the 12th house. Great for manifestation, really, but a little bit reckless when it comes to, feeling suppressed. Venus in Aries has a high libido and sex drive, so in the 12th house, you could just feel a little bit sexually repressed. And again, because of what we've learned from the Virgo eclipse, understand how that expression is affecting all facets of your life. I would also say March the 7th with Venus in Aries conjunct Neptune Aries in your 12th house, a better chance for you to manifest, really use those affirmations, but also focus on what you're looking for in life and love and, luxury, beauty, goals in life and everything that you really want to achieve because, with Neptune being in that position in 12th house, meeting up with Venus, it is quite nice. If you are a Gemini, it's really important to remember that Mercury is retrograding in Pisces right now in a sign that is debilitated and you are Mercury ruled. So communication is going to be all over the shop and a little bit more sensitive and non-confrontational than normal. March the 2nd, Mars enters Pisces in your 10th house, so more of that mutable energy coming at you. This is really good for courage when it comes to your career and actually putting yourself out on the world stage, your public image, being more confident as even if you go to the supermarket, you just feel a little bit more like, oh yeah, I'm confident, I'm feeling my oats. But also with that 10th house, there's potential for frustration and arguments because it's so non-confrontational. It really feels like it could burst at any moment. So if someone is going to do you wrong and you're going to get angry about it, I would definitely try to think about your intuition and focus on it in small incremental steps rather than saying this massive overwhelming thing that's getting me so angry is about to blow, because the last thing you want to do is storm into your boss's office, tell them where to go, and then be like, oh yeah, Mars in Pisces and a Mercury retrograde, my bad, so it's not something we want to do. March the 3rd, we have a lunar eclipse in Virgo in your 4th house, yet more mutable energy. So this is not necessarily a bad eclipse, and actually we are celebrating our authenticity in the way we're showing up with home and family. But you might also find that you've finished a DIY project around the home, especially one that's taken quite a while. And this is something that you've been working on for about 2 years. So it's been in and out sort of projects and emotional work you've been doing. It's quite successful. I'd also say it's something you might have worked on in private. So the phrase like move in silence, and then people don't actually know what you're up to. So there's a bit of privacy to this. I have done a video about this, so make sure that you're looking at that. It's difficult to diagnose, as it were, with the 4th house. It's such a multifaceted house. So take what resonates with this particular transit. You might also find that you're more confident and bold when it comes to taking a leadership role in a group setting, or, being a bit more confident with socializing when Venus enters Aries on March the 6th in your 11th house. It's a little bit reckless. So again, because of Mercury retrograde, be mindful of saying certain things in that setting. But however, it does bring harmony to socializing, working with others, and generally being a little bit more, out of your comfort zone. If you are a Cancer, then March the 2nd, Mars enters Pisces in your 9th house. So Mars in Pisces is neutral, although a bit non-confrontational. In the 9th house, because Pisces is so poetical and dreamy and focused on manifestation, this is more of a motivation to learn something new, particularly something more spiritual, to maybe go back to school to learn something, to conduct a qualification. However, it is also one of those placements that can bring great anger to feeling trapped, especially in your own mind. So there's something that is subconsciously trapping you, a belief system, a person that you would like in your life, but maybe, there's problems there. Just be mindful that Mars can make you more frustrated. March the 3rd, we have a Virgo lunar eclipse in your 3rd house. So this is actually kind of related to the 9th house, really, because they both deal with like projects and also communication, especially more of the sort of day-to-day spiritual communication. The 3rd house is wrapping up a particular project that you've been working on for the past 2 years, or also embracing really positive daily habits in your routine, you know, a good morning routine, a good evening routine, but also noticing the success that you've had from you know, working on a brand or working on some kind of project that has appealed to certain people. There's quite a few ways this can manifest, and I do have a separate eclipse video on this. March the 5th, that Sun in Pisces in the 9th is trining Jupiter in Cancer in your 1st house of self, which is really nice for understanding that there are so many different opportunities out there. You know, we often think like, only this person is on my doorstep, or I can't go anywhere and there is no perspectives around me, and actually there is. So this is really good for starting a new project, for booking a holiday, and for strengthening a particular relationship. Then March the 6th, Venus enters Aries in the 10th house. This is bold and confident for career, for putting yourself on the stage a little bit, you know, even going to the supermarket and feeling like you're, you know, really confident and feeling my oats. It can be very reckless, so just be mindful of that. But it's really good for delivering something important at work, or maybe taking on more of a leadership role. If you are a Leo, then March the 2nd, Mars enters Pisces in your 8th house. You have to be mindful of this particular transit because Mercury is also retrograding in that 8th house, which can potentially bring back exes or situations that you thought you had dealt with. I've been doing a lot of these eclipse readings recently, and it's showing up differently in every single chart, so that's not a guarantee. But I just want to mention it because Mars is all about activity and courage, and it can actually be quite frustrated and angry. And in the 8th house, there's potential to have frustration over intimate relationships, or to pine after somebody and be like, I don't want to let this person go. It can also be motivational when it comes to investments and savings, but it's going to show up in different ways. March the 3rd, we have a Virgo lunar eclipse in your 2nd house, and that can also be linked to the Mars transit. That's because the 2nd house deals with confidence, but also financial security. So this is looking at your finances from the past 2 years, your sense of confidence and security in your home, and saying, wow, how amazing have I done? And giving yourself a little bit of a pat on the back, you know, like, I'm going to be really compassionate with myself. So this is a good eclipse to reflect on your security, but also how you can embrace habits that help you be more secure in the future. March the 6th, Venus enters Aries in the 9th house, which is very impulsive and a little bit reckless. In the 9th house, that kind of is a bit controversial and overly spiritual. You know, you might end up wanting to book a holiday out the blue. It's very bold, but you can also be a bit more confident when it comes to studies if you're a student right now. And I would just warn you that you can think a little bit too hedonistically with this energy, because it's very sort of YOLO, so just be mindful of that. I'd also say that March the 7th, with Venus in Aries conjunct Neptune in Aries in that 9th house, it is pretty good for looking at the fantasy of what you want in your life and saying there are different horizons out there for me. If you are a Virgo, then this is a big week for you. So not only do we have the Mercury retrograde in Pisces, which is affecting you because A, you're Mercury ruled and it's also debilitated and in your 7th house, but March the 2nd, Mars enters Pisces in the 7th house. So that's kind of like, oh yeah, you're here. I'm going to add something extra. So Mars in Pisces is neutral. It's not the worst thing in the world, but there are considerations to be made in the 7th house, which is that Mars deals with, you know, activity in the sex drive. So in the 7th house, it's a yearning for something more from commitment, something a little bit more playful. At the same time, it's very non-confrontational. The 7th house deals with having diplomatic, conversations and constructive business partnerships. So when you're not able to confront, and because Mercury is retrograding, so your communication is a little bit off, it's not really a good time to have those specific conversations that you may need around relationships, around your own identity, but also with business partnerships. That might not sound too bad, but we have to remember that March the 3rd, we have a Virgo lunar eclipse in your 1st house. So it's really important that you actually get your feelings out, because you're going to be more sensitive than normal. Get rid of that emotional and physical clutter that is stopping you from achieving your goals. This is an eclipse where you really look at the past 2 years with these Virgo Pisces eclipses, and the North Node being in Pisces and the South Node being in the 1st house, and saying, actually, how far have I come? You know, this is an eclipse where you're able to say, wow, I'm getting success from my hard work. So it's not a nasty eclipse by any means, but you are embracing your most authentic self. When that's in opposition to something like Mars in Pisces in the 7th house, it's a lot of internal energy, and it's less about having those really important conversations that you actually might need to have. March the 5th is a really good day for strengthening said relationships, especially romantic and friendships. This is really good for starting a new project as well, something where you're working in a team and you're strengthening the relationship with the members in that team. March the 6th, Venus enters Aries in the 8th house. Well, talking about sex drive being high, you know, you've got Mars in the 7th, Venus in the 8th. Okay, so very bold, very confident, a little bit reckless here in the 8th house. Again, there's a bit of a yearning energy here. I'd just be mindful that you're not getting led away with the fairies with that one in particular. March the 7th, the Sun in Pisces is conjunct Mercury in Pisces in that 7th house. So it's very easy to get carried away. You know, there's a lot of delusion energy here. And of course, the problem is, Virgo, that your 7th house is Pisces. So it's always going to be a little bit delusional and a little bit codependent at times as well. So I'd just be mindful of that energy. If you are a Libra, then March the 2nd, Mars enters Pisces in your 6th house. Yes, we keep talking about the 6th house. We're beating a dead horse here, aren't we? But it's because of the Pisces energy. So Mars entering Pisces is pretty neutral. It's very non-confrontational, so it's not very good for confronting a specific co-worker. But it is really good for motivation with physical health, going to the gym, building up those wellness routines, but also a little bit more of the holistic wellness. So the yoga, the Pilates, the meditation, the gentle kind of movement. But also, again, as I mentioned with the Mercury retrograde in the 6th house, checking in with your physical health from the past 2 years. Because, like I said, I hate to beat it, but we had Saturn in Pisces. So the physical health and your routine, you know, there has been some constriction and some discipline there. So it's really good to always check in with yourself. March the 3rd, we have a Virgo lunar eclipse in your 12th house, which really adds to this. So Mars is going to be opposite that. When you've got this eclipse opposite Mars and it's 6th and 12th, it really feels like this combination of your physical health and your subconscious mind and what you're trying to pat yourself on the back with. So for example, the past 2 years, how is your physical health being promoted, but also how is your mental health being affected by that physical health? So don't get caught up in needing to be perfect with your routine or be overly disciplined, but use this as more of a check-in. Oh, this is how well I've done. I'm really proud of myself. It's definitely not one of those eclipses where we've got to cut anything off dramatically or have a pivotal life shift. March the 6th, Venus enters Aries in your 7th house. This is very hot and very confident and brings great harmony to your relationships, although it's a tiny bit selfish at times. So, you know, it's important to remember that you're always focusing on your partner and other people, but you're not losing yourself. But generally, this brings harmony to relationships, both business and romantically. March the 7th, you also have Venus in Aries conjunct Neptune Aries in the 7th house. So that's really wonderful for manifestation and manifesting romantic connections or better communication with a business partner. However, March the 8th, the next day, Venus in Aries is conjunct Saturn Aries in that 7th house. So that is not a great day for money or for implementing things because it's very shaky. So 7th is good for manifestation with love, 8th, not so much. If you are a Scorpio, then March the 2nd, Mars, which is your ruler, enters Pisces in the 5th house. It's a neutral placement, so it's not going to negatively impact you. However, it's very non-confrontational and it's action-led by intuition. So this is really good when focusing on your creative goals, romantic goals, and focusing on what you want to do that makes you more authentic and more creative. It's very gentle and compassionate. However, Mars in Pisces in that 5th house can really raise the libido, so sex drive can be a little bit high, or if you've got a crush or a particular relationship or situationship, particularly in that 5th house, you know, could feel like, wow, really yearning for you. So just be mindful that you might be a bit on overdrive with that. March the 3rd, we have a Virgo lunar eclipse in your 11th house. This is interesting because not only would you have the Mercury retrograde in Pisces in your 5th house, which could potentially bring back an ex for some of you, depending on your chart, but the lunar eclipse in the 11th house is really getting you to celebrate the goals that you have achieved over the past 2 years, but also getting rid of the mental and physical clutter that stops you from achieving those goals. You might also find that because of the eclipse being opposite Mars and Mercury in Pisces in the 5th house, you could have some interesting news related to a relationship or a friend. And it's a little bit more gossipy than anything, but you might be like, oh, okay, didn't expect that. March the 4th, we have Venus in Pisces sextiling Uranus in Taurus. And this is very much, I really want to get out of my comfort zone with relationships and working with other people. So this is definitely not a time, March the 4th specifically, to be like closed off really try to put yourself on your spiritual path by allowing yourself to be open-minded about, your future. March the 6th, Venus enters Aries in your 6th house. So this is really nice harmony for physical health and wellness. It brings a boldness and confidence to working with others, specifically, colleagues. But at the same time, I think it's really giving you a sense of fire up your arse for discipline. So this is actually quite harmonious, even though the specific transit is in detriment. If you are a Sagittarius, then there is a lot of mutable energy for you to face this week. So March the 2nd, Mars enters Pisces in the 4th house. So you've already got Mercury retrograding in the 4th house for you, which can cause issues around the home with appliances, but also family drama with communication. Mars in Pisces is neutral, so it's not a bad thing. However, it's very non-confrontational, so it is not a good time to have those really meaningful conversations with family because it can escalate. You might also find that you want to just pull away and like, this is not the time I want to go into this. It's kind of like an inner war with yourself, but also the things that you keep private. This can be really motivational for doing things around the home, DIY and whatnot, and tapping into your more creative, intuitive side. However, we also have a Virgo lunar eclipse on March the 3rd in your 10th house. So again, as a mutable sign, this impacts you. So this is getting rid of that clutter that is stopping you from achieving your goals with your career and putting yourself out to be the most confident Sagittarius that you can be. This is not a bad eclipse, okay? This is not you cutting anything off, like finishing a job that's like super dramatic and nasty. It's you saying, okay, how do I become the most authentic and disciplined version of myself? And actually, how can I celebrate all the successful things I've done over the past 2 years? So this is not a, oh my God, I have to let something go, it's heartbreaking just because you're a Sagittarius and this is going to hit your 10th house. It's more of, okay, how much work have I put in over the past 2 years to be confident, to work on projects, to get promotions, and to be ambitious. So it's more of a reflecting kind of eclipse. March the 6th, Venus enters Aries in your 5th house. So this is very flirty and fun. This is drop my pants and just go for it, very bold, very confident. And of course, in the 5th house of risk, it's very reckless. Don't be gambling with this energy because Venus in Aries is actually in detriment. I'd also say definitely don't be gambling on March the 8th when Venus in Aries is conjunct Saturn in Aries. Don't be gambling then. But March the 7th, Venus is conjunct Neptune in Aries in that 5th house, which is really good for fantasy and illusion and manifesting love and creativity and maybe even children if that's something you're interested into. If you are a Capricorn rising like myself, then March the 2nd, Mars enters Pisces in the 3rd house for us. We already have Mercury retrograding in Pisces in the 3rd house, which is actually the house that Mercury rules. So we're kind of getting hit double whammy with that debilitation and the fact that our communication is hindered. Mars in Pisces is not bad, but it's very non-confrontational. So in that 3rd house of communication, it's not necessarily that we might not be able to get our words out, but it's also that we won't want to get our words out. It's like, I don't want to start a fight. It's a little bit more in the mind. So there's more potential for anxiety and to have a bit of an inner war with yourself. Like, hello, I'm already resonating with it. But at the same time, it brings great motivation to projects and productivity, and also feeling just really on it with things like social media, branding and marketing. March the 3rd, we have a Virgo lunar eclipse in the 9th house. So this is really embracing your most authentic self and releasing something that has been stopping you from achieving, an expansive perspective on life. You could also be finishing up a thesis or some kind of project you've been working on for the past 2 years that, has being graded or is part of a qualification. There's so many ways this house shows up, so I'm being a little bit vague, but generally it's a successful eclipse where you're saying, oh, these are things I've put in for the past 2 years, the steps, the work, the blood, sweat and tears, and how I've come so far, and this is my celebratory moment. March 4th and 5th is pretty good for relationships with Venus in Pisces, sextiling Uranus and Taurus, and then Sun in Pisces, trining Jupiter in Cancer. Good for strengthening relationships, starting new projects, but also getting out your comfort zone when it comes to romantic ventures or doing creative hobbies that you just wouldn't have thought of before. So like for me, for example, I really want to get into snowboarding, but I'm shit scared because I'm not going to break my back or something. But I know I need to get out my comfort zone and really go for it, You might also find for the rest of the week that you're focused a lot on home and family matters, maybe saving for a house or doing things around the home. And you might also find that there is a lot of subconscious energy focused on old family issues. You just have to continue to work through those issues as best you can and notice that what you are doing right now is more than enough. If you are in Aquarius, then March the 2nd, Mars enters Pisces in your second house. So it leaves your first house of self now. So Mars in Pisces is quite neutral, although it's very non-confrontational. With the second house, this is when money comes and goes very easily. It kind of just goes through a filter, goes back out again. So just be mindful about your finances, because Mars in Pisces can be a little bit indulgent when it comes to financial matters and luxury. It's also a bit of a battle when it comes to security. You want motivation to be able to bring yourself security, but at the same time you're equally frustrated at your current reality. So it's kind of like noticing that what you are right now is okay. You know that you're moving towards something that is more secure in the future. Of course, Mercury retrograding in the second house as well, causing issues in that environment. March the 3rd, we have a lunar eclipse, Virgo lunar eclipse in your 8th house. So this eclipse is really getting rid of that clutter that is stopping you from having a great personal transformation. So have a look at the past 2 years of your life, not just because of the Virgo Pisces eclipses, but Pluto going into Aquarius and all this activity in your sign. How you feel about what you've done with your own personal transformation, your investments and your savings and your intimate relationships. What's the journey, right? If you were a hero's journey in a film, what's the journey that you're currently on? How do you restore yourself to equilibrium? And how can you look back at the film and say, oh, these are the moments that were really entertaining and exciting, and look how far I've come, the moment where you understand the personal character development. This is what that eclipse is bringing towards you. I would also just note as well, because of Mars in Pisces in the second house, there is a definite link to financial matters here. March the 6th, Venus enters Aries in your 3rd house, which brings great harmony to productivity, communication, although Mercury is still retrograding, so just be mindful about that. But it makes you more bold and confident, so you're more confident with a daily routine, you're able to speak up. Again, because of Mercury retrograde, it's not the best time to give a TED Talk presentation, but in small groups where you're speaking up for yourself a little bit more, I think it could be quite harmonious. So last but not least, and definitely a main character this week, is Pisces. So we already have Mercury retrograding in Pisces in the first house of self, and that is a debilitated energy. So communication is all over the shop and a little bit away with the fairies. March the 2nd, Mars enters Pisces in the first house, which brings great motivation and productivity to your goals, but it also makes you more angry, frustrated, sex drive is higher. Mars in Pisces is not bad. It's actually fine, but it's non-confrontational, meaning that it will kind of bury its head in the sand and be delusional because it doesn't really want to see the reality of things. And so that has you battling with yourself, having a bit of an inner war. You can be very gentle and compassionate with this transit, and I would promote you to do that. However, I would say that this particular energy can cause a lot of frustration and anger because of the eclipse happening on March the 3rd, the Virgo lunar eclipse in your 7th house. That's going to be in opposition to Mars in Pisces. Yes, it's going to be at 0 degrees, but that's a very potent degree for it to be at. It's just entering the sign. So that's going to create an opportunity for you to get rid of the clutter in your life when it comes to committed relationships and people that you're working with one-on-one. It doesn't have to be a romantic relationship if you don't resonate with that. It can be business partnerships, making key decisions, legal matters, but also it's embracing the habits that would serve you well in the future when it comes to your relationships of any form and variety. So remember that that South node is in your 7th house. So it's getting you to release the need for codependency, the need to get rid of toxic habits related to your 7th house. And Mars is giving the activity to do that now, or the drive, I should say. Also, March the 4th, Venus in Pisces, which is making you very magnetic and attractive right now, and is probably the only good thing in Pisces, is the sextiling Uranus and Taurus. So that's really good for productivity, but also getting out your comfort zone and doing things a little bit differently. And again, because Venus is in your 1st house, you have better results with that. March the 5th, the Sun in Pisces in your 1st house is trining Jupiter and Cancer in your 5th house. Really love this for starting a new project, for meeting someone new, for going on a date, strengthening an existing relationship. It just feels very confident and pretty beautiful. And then March the 6th, Venus enters Aries in your 2nd house. So Venus leaves your sign, which is exalted, and moves into a sign where it's in detriment. And it's very confident and bold in a house that itself is very confident. So this is pretty good for feeling your oats and being luxurious. However, it's quite selfish and a bit hedonistic. So just be mindful about, overeating or doing things that people might perceive to be extremely selfish and self-centered. I'd also say on March the 8th is a really good day for meeting new people. Mercury in Pisces, yes, it's retrograde, trining Jupiter in Cancer, making friends comes very easily here, but also, again, going on a date, something a little bit more superficial and flirty than it is like meaningful and really spiritual. So that was the wrap up for the week. Obviously a lot going on, so there's a lot of different energies, and actually I think that reflects the mutable nature of the month, really, is that we're going in and out, in and out. We are all having to face some kind of transition, and yes, it is going to be a pivotal week, not only because of Mars, but also because of the eclipse in Virgo. So just be kind to yourself, be compassionate. You might feel a bit more emotional than normal depending on what your placements are. You know, you might be an Aquarius sun, but you've got a Virgo moon, and that moon is like being hit, you know, it's conjunct. So have a look at your birth chart to see how this is impacted too, and I'll see you for the reading next week.